I'm going to say a warm welcome and good morning from Tech Central. We're really excited about the webinar today where we're going to be discussing the future of wireless networks. It's kindly brought to you by CommScope. Thank you all for joining us today as we delve into the challenges you may be facing with your network's infrastructure. We welcome your active participation in today's event. Please do use the Q&A functionality and pose any questions you'd like answered. We'll be discussing these during and after the panel discussion. If you'd also like to raise your voice and ask the question directly, please utilize the raised hand function and I'll promote you to the panel so that you can ask. I'm now going to hand over to Daniel Rovers, who's our host and moderator for today's session.
Good morning, Kerry. Good morning, Simon and Riaan and all our attendees. And thank you for giving us an hour of your day. If you are fortunate enough to be attending this web call from home, I hope you've got a great cup of coffee with you or whatever your brew is, and you're responsible for the quality of it. What we're responsible for is the quality of the content today. And I'm really honored that we've got Simon and Riaan with us today because of their wealth of knowledge. Now, when Kerry asked me to facilitate today, it was a really interesting session to get into because Wi-Fi for me and a wireless network is almost ubiquitous. And in research, I wanted to understand where Wi-Fi came from. So this is just a trick question series of questions. I wonder if you know when the first wireless network was available. I won't wait for an answer, and I'm not going to pick on Simon or Riaan as our resident experts, but in 1971, Aloha Net was the first wireless packet network used in Hawaii to connect the islands. And that's really the grandmother of Wi-Fi. So it wasn't really Wi-Fi yet. It was just passing packets of data. In 1988, WaveLAN Tech almost had Wi-Fi and was passing also data through radio signals. But in 1997, Wi-Fi arrived. 802.11 was in June 1997, and that was at 2 megabits per second. Do you remember the dial-up speeds? I think, Simon, you probably wrote that if I look at the profile. No, he didn't. Simon, you did, but you have been around. So let me introduce our two guests today. We've got Simon, who's been around since before Wi-Fi. He's got over 25 years of experience in enterprise and service provider networking across a range of telco technologies, including routing, switching, LAN, WLAN, mobile data, and multi-service systems. At CommScope, Simon is responsible for product management and marketing of the ICX switching portfolio across EMEA, which gives him a lot of time to spend in the sky, and I'm sure he's enjoying the fact that Wi-Fi is now available on most planes. Riaan, who's going to be our speaker today, is the Enterprise Sales Director for CommScope Sub-Saharan Africa, and he joined them in 2019 when CommScope acquired Ruckus Networks, where he was also a sales director for the region for the past 5 years. He's got a strong focus on broadband wireless access, and it's been his speciality since 1999. He's worked all over telcos for the past 21 years and has got a great experience within our region. But more importantly for me, Riaan also does volunteer work at a school where he looks after their IT needs and just ensures that learners are immersed in IT from an early age so that they don't have any holdback or are getting an advantage of being thrust into IT and are IT literate. And I really appreciate that, Riaan. As a dad, I know how easy it is for kids to fall behind, and just want to thank you for the work that you're doing in a public school. So thank you very much. So Riaan's going to take us through where this wireless network is going and why it's so important to have a converged network and what are the importance. And then I've prepped a couple of tough questions, but I'm hoping that our attendees are also going to throw in some questions for Simon and Riaan afterwards. So without further rambling from the robust side, grab your coffee, lean back, and we're going to hand over to Riaan.
Right, welcome everybody. First of all, I think if anyone told you at the beginning of this year that we would be living in a surreal, almost Hollywood movie-like environment, I think all of us would have discounted it and taken it for a laugh. You know, this has been a very interesting year in itself, but also very pertinently, if, you know, I'm going to put the following position forward. If we had the COVID pandemic 10 years earlier, I can guarantee you that the world at large would have been in a much, much more difficult place and position, purely because of connectivity. And the key connectivity driver throughout the world currently is mobility, mobile connectivity. If we think about Mr. Steve Jobs and the excellent work he's done, when he introduced the first smartphone in 2007, I think very few of us imagined the way it will change and shape our new world. I remember the early days of cellular telephones in the early 90s, when we were calling it yuppie toys, etc. Yet today, it's become so much more than just a device that you call on. So that's just kind of an intro. You know, the world is changing rapidly and we're facing COVID challenges, make no mistake. Fortunately, we do have the technology, and it's been proven globally that the mobility connectivity that is available globally at large allowed corporates to function at probably a high level of normality, even though we have to function outside of office environments. Now, if we have a look at, you know, I don't know if you guys are like me, but I get up very early in the mornings. I like to get an early start to the morning. First thing I do is I get coffee. Second thing I do is I try and kill my emails. We're a multinational company, so when we go to bed at night, the US is awake. By the time I wake up, I've got an inbox full of emails, and you know, I hate to start the day without a clean inbox. Now, interestingly enough, if we have a look at what has happened in the past couple of years, and this slide is actually very telling, and it kind of puts you back a bit. But just on emails, for instance, every single minute, we are looking at about 188 million emails that's being sent. Now, again, I have to confess, we are probably not the part of the younger generation, or at least my kids remind me of that often enough. So email for us is still a very strong driver of business today, the way we communicate. But the younger generations, they just don't understand email, quite frankly, because they want everything done instantly. So, for instance, if you have a look at, let's say, for instance, SnapScan, 2.1 million per minute. It is insane the amount of volume of data that is being generated on a daily basis. And we're at the point now where we just take this for granted. And to Daniel's point, if I remember back in the early days, pre-Wi-Fi standard, the first ever AP that I worked on delivered 128 kilobits per second. You know, we wouldn't be able to do anything with that today, right? So as we can see, the world's demand on connectivity and mobility has increased tenfold, and it's going to continue to do this. Networks are becoming much, much harder to manage, to make sure that you cater for all of the needs. If we have a look at, there's more applications that you need to service, and you need to be able to securely onboard for your customer base. There's more demand on the network. You need multiple devices connected, etc. And then if you look at the technologies, which is critical, if you look at the introduction of Wi-Fi 6 now, 5G, that is, very prevalent today, and it continue to be prevalent in the coming years. And we'll see the use of 5G increase over the next couple of. And then we look at the, the connectivity speeds at large. We're talking about 400 gigabit Ethernet. 400 gigabit Ethernet. I mean, it is insane. And again, it is the amount of data and volume that needs to be transferred that is demanding this. And then, of course, on top of that is the way you analyze and manage and monitor your multi-layered network becomes a challenge, a significant challenge, in the sense that you've got BYOD devices. How do I onboard remote users onto my network? How do I ensure their security, the integrity of the network, the scalability of the network, the experience still needs to be stellar. So how do I ensure that, there's a good customer experience with all of these different technologies being added to the network on an ongoing basis? And again, quite frankly, I think that's just going to increase over time. So if we have a look at a couple of stats, and I think this slide, obviously this slide, and the survey was done before COVID hit properly. But just let's have a look at these figures quickly. An increasing mobile workforce. I think none of us will disagree with this statement, especially now in the COVID environment. Typically 38% of the workforce is mobile. Yet, currently where we find ourselves in the COVID pandemic scenario, I would hazard a guess that the 2021 projections of 53% has already been exceeded. I think it's probably closer to 70% of the total workforce are now, obviously, because of COVID, forced to be mobile and still be connected and still be productive for the business. So this is an immense demand increase. If we have a look at the connected mobile workforce, 52% at the beginning of 2020, 52% plus minus were Wi-Fi only employees. Again, my view is at least 70% today utilizes Wi-Fi for connectivity at the home office, etc. I mean, again, guys, if we think back 5 years, the demand and the need for Wi-Fi connectivity is not even close to what it is today. I remember I took, when we went on holiday in December last year, we rented a nice place at the coast. And of course, we want to get away from the hustle and bustle from daily life. The first thing my youngest said when he walked into the beach house, he says, "But Dad, there's no Wi-Fi." And, my kind of comical response was, well, that's exactly why we got this house. We don't want Wi-Fi, right? The point is that the younger generation's demand and dependency on mobile, always on connectivity is exponentially more than ours, and it's going to continue to be so. As the generations come through, it's just the way it is. So we need to be sure that, from a network perspective, we can cater for those needs, regardless if you are a service provider or a retailer or in hospitality. Your demands from your customer base is ever increasing and becoming more and more challenging. So if we have a look at sorry, let me just do this quickly. If we have a look at what is happening in the environment of a converged infrastructure that we are currently facing locally as well as globally, we've got a number of technology sets on the left-hand side that any business today will have to be able to manage and cater for, and it needs to be a quality service that you provide either to your internal staff or to your external customer base. And they demand this. It is not just a nice to have anymore. Those days are gone. It is a demand from the customer base, your internal and external customers. If we look at devices, for instance, Wi-Fi is prevalent in office environments, not just office environments anymore, at home. As fiber to the home gets increased popularity and the costs come down, Wi-Fi is prevalent pretty much everywhere. When you go to a retail store, when you go to the movies, you need Wi-Fi. Then I think the one that's had the biggest impact on our continent, specifically over the past, I'd say 15, 20 years, is mobile data, mobile devices. In the early days of GSM in South Africa, just to give you guys a snapshot of the surveys that were done and the feasibility studies before GSM was introduced, the total demand projection out of the studies for South Africa was a total of 2.1 million potential users. How wrong was that survey? And again, it is proven time and time again, regardless of where you are, you want to have connectivity, you want to have quality connectivity, you want to do what you want to do without any restrictions or limitations. Something else that has become very, it's kind of become, less focused on, and I'll touch on this a bit later, but it is very critical in any converged network today, and that is your device and data, the cabled infrastructure. I'll get back to that a bit later. Of course, critical in today's converged environment where you've got a myriad of technologies in your network that you need to manage, and you need to manage it properly, right? So management becomes critical, all of these different technology sets. And then, of course, the security of these devices on your network, end customers that log on to your infrastructure. How do you secure them? How do you onboard them properly? How do you make sure that they've got a quality experience, yet you safeguard them and yourselves as an organization from any potential threats? That is critical. So as we have a look at this changing environment, let me just see why it's not moving. Sorry, guys. It is critical to understand that in this converged environment, there are a lot of technologies. And what I would like to do today is to show you how CommScope can help you with your converged networking and technology journey. So if we, for instance, have a look at CommScope as an organization, I'm sure some of you will not be very familiar with CommScope as an organization, and that's okay. Just a couple of snippets of where you would potentially be actually using CommScope technology and you wouldn't know it. First of all, if you have fiber to the home, there's a very good likelihood that your termination units, the patch panels, and the street cabinets are supplied by CommScope, for instance. If we have a look at GSM, most of the mobile operators on the continent will be using our RAN technology sets. So you effectively will be transferring and transporting your voice and data across the GSM networks utilizing CommScope technologies. Something that is more prevalent to South Africa. Most of you are familiar with Vodafone Explorer, DSTV Explorer. That Explorer decoder is owned, developed, and built by CommScope in-house. And then, of course, in data centers, there's a myriad of fiber, inside plant, etc., that is supplied. And then, Wi-Fi and network switching. Under Ruckus, we supply, again, pretty much most verticals throughout the continent with different with different requirements in retail, in the telecom space, in hospitality, in universities, etc. So again, if we have a look at CommScope, it is a very large organization, and what they've done over the last 44 years is they've geared themselves to be able to address the digital revolution that started in the mid-2015s, and then going into the Internet of Things that we all talk about today. So the company is well aligned with the different technology sets below it to make sure that we can service most demands and needs of corporates today, in today's changing environment. Right. This is a beautiful, beautiful picture of I think probably one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It's well recognized, the city of Cape Town. The reason I took this photo is twofold. The one is not just the beauty, but the other is in a city environment, it is a very, very complex networking environment that needs to service the community at large in a city environment, right? You've got utilities, you've got administration, you've got health services, you've got police services, you've got admin office, etc. So it is a large-scale network with a number of challenges within the different regions of the city's framework that they are responsible for. Likewise, you can taper it down to a much smaller environment, let's take a large corporate, they would have similar challenges. I think the scale of the city of Cape Town is just obviously significantly more than let's say a large, national brand or national company. If we have a look at the way the city needs to be able to ensure that there's proper service delivery to all of their different business units that look after rates and taxes, health clinics, hospitals, police services, as I mentioned, there's a myriad of technologies that needs to be managed and controlled and service these end customers very well. For instance, CCTV becomes critical for, traffic flow management is one example. Another would be for policing to make sure that crime management is in place, etc. So in a very complex environment like this, there is a combination of technology sets that you need to have a look at and that you need to cater for. So if we have a look at we call it a unified network vision, and this is networks of today and obviously looking forward within the next 5 to 7 years. This is what's going to happen with most networks. Typically what you've got is on the edge, you would have a number of access or edge technologies that service different needs. For instance, you would have 5G indoor Wi-Fi coverage DAS systems in malls so that you can still receive and make calls from your mobile. You would have mobile 5G, 4G data, right, so that you can comfortably call whenever you want to, either when you're traveling in the car or commuting or walking down the sidewalk or in the suburb, etc. You've got Wi-Fi connectivity. Now, of course, Wi-Fi connectivity is not just destined for indoor applications. There's a lot of outdoor applications that gets used, not just in a business environment, but also in the environment of City of Cape Town, for instance. There's a lot of rural areas where the infrastructure is not what it needs to be, and a quick and easy and cost-effective way of addressing that social responsibility is to introduce Wi-Fi into these areas, outdoor Wi-Fi, to at least give the community at large access to data, access to network infrastructure, access to the actual council itself, so that they can have connectivity and utilize, at least not be left behind like the rest of the city would. Then, of course, your switching infrastructure is always critical. I spoke earlier about the demands and the capacities in your network increasing significantly. We're talking about 400 gig already. And the infrastructure of your corporate business needs to cater not just for demands of today, but also the way you will be expanding and how you could expand the potential demand increases over the next 5 years without having to rip and replace technology every 2 to 3 years to keep up with the demand. I'll speak a bit about that later on. Then smart cabling in very large environments, large corporates, some, again, City of Cape Town that's got a very dispersed operational footprint. It becomes critical to have physical visibility of what's happening with your cabled infrastructure, be it on the fiber side or on the copper side. It is just too diverse to send someone to go and have a look if there's a problem. So again, having a smart cabling infrastructure gives the city the capability of reacting proactively to a potential problem and ensuring that the service level that is delivered is obviously of the best possible. The introduction of IoT services, smart devices, we've heard this, but I mean, if you go to the airport, City of Cape Town, Joburg, PE, Durban, etc., you will see when you drive into the car park, you've got a red light and a blue light, right? If it's green, you can park there. If it's red, obviously, you know, the parking lot, the parking's been taken. That is a very simple example of IoT. So in other words, this is becoming more prevalent. If you look at security on cameras, face recognition, number plate recognition, time stamping of when an individual enters a specific area, when they exit. All of this becomes very critical in a unified network going forward. And then, of course, you've got your WAN devices. If you've got areas that needs to be serviced, be it warehousing, be it the docks, at the waterfront, and you can't get fiber into that infrastructure or that required area, The alternative would be to use typically transmission-based technologies like microwave, license band microwave, high-capacity microwave, to ensure that you can get proper network connectivity to the edge of the network, where it is sometimes very difficult. So this is the edge of the network. What is at the heart of the network in the core, obviously, is you need to have a centralized configuration platform that can, service all of these edge technologies and make sense of them, right? And make sure that you can optimize and you can manage the configurations, make sure that all of these technologies are on the latest firmware, softwares, everything is running the way it is. Then very critically, and this is critical in today's day, and this is going to become probably the key driver going forward, is data analysis. Typically in a large corporate environment, and you'll find it with the City of Cape Town, for instance, as well, a lot of the departments tend to work in silos. So the roadworks department will have their own independent network, and it is completely separate to the admin and finance department within the city. And I think to a large extent, you'll find that in corporate environments as well. They are not really, converged or mixed as a single unified network. And therein lies a lot of problems or challenges. Why? Yeah, sorry, Daniel.
Well, Riaan, that's almost the segue into the first of the questions. And I love this slide. And when we were preparing, we said this is a good point to pause on because there's so much discussion point around here. And for my own uneducated view, when I see all these boxes that are here and all of these different devices that are around, I just want to walk in with my phone, get onto the network and watch a movie while I'm waiting for a meeting. And how are people doing it today? Why is this all of a sudden such a drive to look at the modernization of the network?
Well, again, I mean, if we go back 5 years, Netflix was not really pervasive in our environment. And again, the way we functioned as employees and owners of businesses was completely different, right? The fact that you have literally the internet in your hands, you can access Facebook, you can access Instagram, that has changed the way customers will engage and connect to the network. And quite rightly so. So when I go to a meeting and I've got 2 minutes spare, I'm early and I'm waiting for the meeting, I would potentially want to go and post something on Twitter quickly that's relevant, that's happened today within the business. And you need the means to be able to do that. However, once I'm inside the customer's network, right, the challenge becomes how will the customer give me secure access and still give me the freedom to do what I need to do? And that is the challenges. And with
so
data,
maybe you want to pause there, and that's a good place to bring Simon in. Simon, just from an external perspective, living outside of South Africa, are the needs in your region any different from the needs that you're seeing here from a South African perspective, or are users becoming more expectant at the rate that we are seeing in Johannesburg?
Oh, I think it's without a doubt the requirements and the expectations of users, businesses, are universal. And really, to the point that Riaan was making, universal access to networks, to the internet, is without doubt something that is an expectation. So everyone from Riaan's son to the CEO of a major business would expect to have access to the data, the services, and the systems that they need or desire universally. So whether they're on the beach, in their office, at home, or in their local shopping mall, it has to be fully functional, fast, and extremely reliable as well. And users everywhere have that same expectation.
So there was a question posed and in the chat, which leads into this converged lifestyle, where where the lines between our private life and our work life are just so blurred today. We need more network access. We need more capacity in order to do this. Are we? I wrote it down. Is the elephant in the room 5G? Am I risking my health or my kids' health because of 5G? Is there anything out there? Was that the biggest conspiracy since JFK?
Okay, so sorry, Simon.
I'm going to go with Riaan first because he jumped, and then we want to hear the funny accent talk as well.
Okay, so I'll start, Simon. You can fill in. Okay, so first of all, no, there is no threat. Again, if we have a look at any radio transmitted device that is utilized in today's telecommunications industry at large, it needs to comply with a number of regulatory requirements. So in other words, we've got the ITU standards, and then beneath that, we've got the IEEE, and then we've got the regional bodies that look after the responsibilities and management of those product that gets utilized. So for instance, with 5G specifically, there is a maximum transmit power that is allowed on that device. And again, the maximum transmit power on that device is nowhere near harmful to anyone. It is the same as 4G, for instance, right? There is, so it's a fallacy. It is well controlled. It is well programmed. It is well documented, and it's managed by the IEEE International Standards Body.
Okay, but I voted for Hansi, and I've seen adverts for where doctors were promoting cigarettes in the 60s. So we're going to get back to you, Riaan. Simon, do you want to go there before we go to Rennie? So Simon, do you want to go and answer?
Yeah, if I could just say, it's all covered by regulation and whatever. What I would say actually is there is no scientific evidence of the threat that posed by people talk about 5G technology or 5th generation mobile technology. The radio frequencies that operates in are not new. There's nothing new in the world. These radio frequencies already exist. They were already previously being used for things like analog radio, analog TV, CB radios. These are, if you like, recovered radio frequencies were used for other things, which are now no longer required. And so they're not being used for that. So they've been turned over to cellular networks. So we've been using all of the radio frequencies that 5G cellular networks or mobile telephone networks use. We've been using those for years anyway. This is nothing new in terms of, if you like, the background radio that we have in our lives. And to Riaan's point, I mean, one of the early myths, long before 5G, when it was 2G and 3G, and people got very upset about, the dangers that the radios posed, and people objected to having radio masts put near their homes or near their workplaces because they said it was going to cause them health problems. The reality is, because of the sophistication of this technology, you're actually better off being further away from, you're better off being close to a mast than you are further away, because the very sophisticated radio management things that happen in your handset that you're holding in your hand, that is a radio transmitter. When you're making a telephone call, if you're close to the mast, your handset turns its power right down and does less work and transmits fewer radio waves. You're better off being close to a mast than you are further away.
Okay, I'm going to pause you there.
That's the science.
I'm going to pause you there because I think we haven't looked at the volumes and on the studies. Everybody says that a healthy balance, but if you look at the hours that we're putting into these devices, there might be something there. But Rennie's been waiting to ask a question quickly. Rennie, over to you if you're there.
Hi, how are you?
Too good. Thank you for asking.
Fine, sir. Man, I'm a bit concerned because we are in a so-called deep rural area. It seems we are still in the dark because we are struggling with connectivity. But I was reading this latest technology, because it's there all the time, TV white space for connectivity. And I don't know if there is any institution where I can go and study so that I can see if people get access to internet with this 4K or 8K compatibility type of technology. Do you know of any institutions? That's my question. In South Africa, where I can go and study this?
Thanks, Rini. So again, the TV white space is, as Daniel said, and Simon, it is old TV transmission frequencies that's now been freed up by ICASA, or in the process of being freed up by ICASA. And what will happen is they are repurposing those frequency channels for broadband data transmissions. What I can tell you is that, Rini, at this point in time, my understanding is that ICASA has not approved and signed off the reuse of the TV white space. They are in the process of evaluating what slots of the frequencies will be made available. I can suggest, however, if you want to find out who would be potentially able to assist you with technologies that will be available in the TV white space frequency sets, ICASA would be a good place to start, because they would have a exhaustive list of all potential players within the TV white space. So surely you would be able to at least get some guidance from ICASA.
So what I suggest on that is just in the chat, just pop in your email address or send it privately to Kerry, and then Riaan can answer you on that. We had a question in the Q&A. Gideon, I'm going to get to you, or Gideon, I'm going to get to you right now. A question was, do you think data will ever be free? And will data ever be free without impacting the business revenue for ISPs? I think there's two sides to that. One is a commercial one and one is a technology enabled one. Simon, I'd love your take on that, because from a Europe perspective, we may be teetering somewhere different. What do you think about that? Do you think data is ever going to be free?
Data is, well, we should really now today be thinking of data as a utility. So a utility in the way that you think of to your home or your business, you have water connectivity, you have your gas or electricity. These utilities are required in order to function in daily life. Data or network connectivity is the same, and whoever provides that, they have to do that. There's a cost involved, and also this is generally done by private businesses. Indeed, certainly across much of the world now, gas, electricity, and so forth are provided by private industries or private businesses. I say they have a cost, they have to cover that cost, and they also typically have shareholders and they have to make a profit as well. So data is the same, it's just another utility. So will it be free? No, I don't believe it ever will be completely free, just as we don't get free electricity. But by the same token, I think it's the cost per bit, if you like, or cost per megabit will go down. But then again, our demand for more and more will probably go up as well.
So not to be dramatic, it's almost like the discussion regarding HIV antiretrovirals, which have to be at a cost where everybody can afford them, because is it becoming a basic human right to have access to data?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at governments in many countries now, the services that those governments provide, or in order to get access to information, submit your tax returns, make any other take advantage of government services, requires access to a data service, an internet service. How you do that, whether you're going into a free access in a library, or whether you're paying for that and using your mobile phone, somebody is going to have to pay for the infrastructure to do that. Okay. So not to if you're wealthy enough to pay for it yourself, and if you're not, then hopefully there are charitable or support organisations that will do that.
No one's in this for charities. Everybody is in it to make a buck. But I'm not to kick this horse down the path too far, Riaan. Is that where your responsibility is then to look at a simplified network as much as possible? Because you actually have to get the costs for rolling out the network as low as possible. Is that why this converged network is so important? Just pause on that thought. I just want to ask Gideon. Pause on that one. I'm going to ask you again. Gideon, I can't see you, so I don't know if you want to ask a question, but go ahead. Who are you and where do you come from?
Maybe you've heard of us. We're a small company called Boomercam.
Yeah.
I'm sure Riaan, he's smiling there.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I can tell you one thing, white space TV, I've spent a lot of time on it. It's a big headache. There's a lot of unknown licenses and so I think your person had asked that earlier. Yeah, good luck with that. And there's no proper technology to send the right volumes of bandwidth yet. It can travel the distance, but it can't give you, I guess, 50 megs to 100 to 1 gigabits kind of transfer rate. So, and that becomes very cost effective. I guess very high cost if you want to do that because of the limitation in technology. Riaan, you maybe have some more information on that. But I think my other question is, we constantly always looking, as you've seen our polls all over, and as our reach grows, people are calling us from everywhere to saying, hey, I've got a camera and we want it onto your system. How do you get it connected in the middle of nowhere? Like a Kuruman and an N. And one of the things that's popped up is actually low-flying satellites now. I don't know what your exposure has been to that from a connectivity point of view. And I think that with one, two, you know, the best service that we can provide will always be fiber. And we've got a good reach with all our sister companies at DFA, Vumatel, and NN. But I think definitely wherever there's not fiber, is the low-flying satellites an option? What would you guys suggest? So, yeah.
Okay, Gideon, I think, you know, it's an interesting question. However, I think the thing that satellites always, your challenge with satellites is twofold. The one is the latency on the network. Right? It is, so if you don't have a latency sensitive application that you're running across it, then it's fine. The other thing is we need to understand that the cost point or the cost per megabit on a satellite service will always be significantly more expensive or more expensive than typical fiber. It's just a different, right? It's got a finite amount of transistors on it that it can transmit data down, right? And they need to optimize that. So I think, you know, even low orbit satellites, if you look at Starlink with Elon Musk, right? It's still very early days, Gideon. I wouldn't say never, but I think it will be a challenge. In my mind, at best, it'll be on the top end of fiber connectivity, you know, doing a complete fiber roll. You know, to justify the cost, and it'll be more expensive. So again, you have to have a look at latencies, etc. I don't know when low orbit satellites will be available in our territory per se. I know that Starlink's doing a significant job in North America specifically, and I know he's got plans to obviously introduce this on a global scale, but it's still early days, Gideon.
So just tying onto that, Megan Richardson in the Q&A asked if we as South Africa would ever be involved in SpaceX Starlink program. And I think you've asked that with Elon Musk. I mean, his view is he wants to have internet access across the globe. For me, as someone who hikes and runs and is in mountains, I think that would be the second saddest thing that ever happens, as there is nice time to get out of there. But this concept of creating a web around the earth is one which really, for people who live in those environments where we aren't servicing, the next Elon Musk may just be living there in Tibet or in the steppes of Russia. So So yeah, let me leave that. Simon, Riaan swerved the bullet there when I was talking about working on getting your costs as low as possible to create the network. Is this where this converged network is so important? Is this why you're pushing an upgrade to a 6? Is that the reasoning behind it, or why should we be Wi-Fi 6? Why should we even worry about it?
So Wi-Fi 6, in fact, I noticed that there's a question from one of the attendees about how soon should we upgrade to Wi-Fi 6. So this is dependent really on every individual organization's requirements. And there isn't one size fits all and everyone should jump to Wi-Fi 6 immediately. So if an organization has an existing Wi-Fi network deployed in their facilities and it works perfectly well and meets the requirements of the business in terms of capacity and speed, then there is no need to jump to Wi-Fi 6. You don't have
so
to
it's not a rip and replace.
Sorry?
It's not a rip and replace.
Well,
we can do that if we're rolling out new network areas.
Exactly. So if you're deploying a new network, if your existing network is reaching the end of its life, is no longer fit for purpose, and you're looking for an upgrade, then it would make a great deal of sense that you do look at the latest generation of technology and deploying that. There is usually a small cost premium in buying the latest technology. So again, it's a question of making sure that that is going to give you some advantage. There's going to be a return on that cost and it's worthwhile doing. Otherwise, you may choose not to deploy Wi-Fi 6. But Wi-Fi 6, certainly if you are working in more dense user-dense environments, so places like stadiums, or public spaces, stadiums, shopping malls, theatres, these sorts of places where there's high densities of users, then Wi-Fi 6 does bring some significant advantages and something you should definitely be looking at if you are operating in those environments and your current network is not meeting your needs.
So, Riaan, as South Africans, we often read on the news about cable theft and copper theft and people making millions off our copper infrastructure and rail, and there are barons out there that are making money. Are we, with Wi-Fi 6 coming with these self-healing networks, with all these advancements that are coming, are we running the risk of being left behind because of our cabling and fiber infrastructure, or are we keeping up with that?
Okay, now, so to be fair, I think with regards to cable theft, we've got less threat because most of the deployments, specifically for fiber to the home, it is fiber, right? So there's no copper involved, so the theft is not there. With regards to fiber deployments, I can tell you now that, and I think Vumatel being the pioneers, in my view, of fiber to the home and actually bringing it to life a couple of years back.
Free plug there, Riaan.
Yeah, well, I mean, they made a decision to test the business case where OpenServe or Telkom or BCX, whatever you want to call them now, just did not have the appetite to do it. And quite frankly, I think the model has proven itself that, by getting fiber infrastructure in, it actually alleviates a hell of a lot of, access to data, first of all.
Okay.
And there's a proper business model in that. So I don't think we are necessarily far behind. Again, if we look at the key centrists, take the Sandtons, the CBDs, all the big areas. I don't think we are far behind Europe in that sense. I think where we do have challenges, which is geography based, is that we have a very dispersed population throughout South Africa. So to Gideon's point, what do you do in Kuruman, right? The cost of introducing fiber into that environment is excessively higher. Why? Because it's a lower density of people, of population, yet your input cost of building a POP and then introducing fiber into that environment is exponentially more, it's expensive. So you need to have a look at the return on investment that you're making, etc. But what I would suggest is there is definitely merit for introducing or utilizing Wi-Fi as a last mile access technology where fiber simply does not make sense. So take fiber as far as you can, and then the last mile access. You can easily introduce Wi-Fi 6 outdoor technology to create high capacity, good quality of service, right? And we do it with a number of partners, Facebook, Google, there's a number of them that we do with this with globally, specifically in the rural areas. Because unfortunately, currently all fiber connectivity, fiber to the home, is addressing the high LSM market, right?
Yeah.
The bulk of our LSM target market is below the business model case. And I'm waiting for a company that's got the business model to take it to the lower LSM, because you've got the volume.
I can't agree with you more. I go to the Eastern Cape quite often, and you see people plowing in their fields like it was in the 15th century, and they deserve access. They deserve access because it can change their lives. And we've had these debates since 1995 when we rolled out the GSM networks and base stations. And the argument was we don't get enough traffic in the Free State. There are base stations there. People can phone there. My question for Simon, who's looking very anxious to answer something here before I go to the QA box, that with the maturation of all these network components and the where it's going, are our skilled engineers being left behind, or is it more of a black box that they can do better things?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because certainly I'd say in the last few years and looking ahead, the skill sets that engineers, traditional network engineers, the skill sets that they have are certainly evolving. So a few years ago, well, you could argue up until until very recently, people's ability to enter commands into routers and switches and such like, command line programming devices manually was certainly something that was highly prized, and something that people needed to do. More recently, really, the skill sets are changing. It's more about scripting and programming from that point of view. So providing or using and creating and using tools which scale much more effectively. So I'm not managing individual devices, I'm scripting so that I can program many devices simultaneously much more reliably. So that's really a change in skill sets of engineers, and it's responsibility of engineers and their employers to make sure that they upskill as the technologies change and evolve. But ultimately, the underlying requirement to understand what you're doing, understand the network technology and how it works, that's always going to be there. So that fundamental skill set of understanding network is there. It's really about how we deploy and manage networks that's changing. It's becoming more automated than it ever has, and it's about evolving with that and taking advantage of that.
We've got an excellent question. Matthew seems to be smashing them through here. With the growing cloud, cloud footprint and the reliance on cloud, everyone's working at home. We understand that. The comment is network capacity is more than just speed. Demand on network still appears to be a large challenge for our big providers. This was evident in the beginning of lockdown. What, Riaan, do you think your growth in the network and the converged network and self-healing networks, how is that going to help us with giving more bandwidth and more capacity?
Well, again, let's use the following example to illustrate. With the introduction of Wi-Fi 6, your typical copper cabled infrastructure in your network no longer suffice. And the reason for that is your traditional Cat5e infrastructure that you would use to connect your network into your switches and into your servers in the data center is typically running at 1 gigabit per second, right? Wi-Fi 6 is now already running at in excess of 2.5 gigabits per second. We've got 2.5 gig ports on that radio. It means that it's simply the actual plumbing that provides the heart of being able to connect is being blocked, right? There's just too much capacity that needs to go through. So I think what we need to have a look at is you need to have a look at what's your status of your network infrastructure today. Is most of your LAN environment running on 1 gig? Okay, I can tell you now you're going to have problems in the near future because the demands are significantly more. So you need to start having a look at your switching capabilities up to 10 gig, right? And then you need to have a look at your Wi-Fi technologies that you will be introducing. There's a method, or there's a reason why Wi-Fi 6 has been introduced, because it offers much more densification, concurrent users at the same time, but higher capacities as well. And the demand is, right, we need to be able to service everyone at the highest possible speed because the demands on the network is so much more. So you need to have a look
pause there. No, yeah. Pause there. We've got a question again. I'm going to put it to Simon. We have a zone director system. Can it be upgraded to provide switch management? Come on, technical Pollard.
So that's a very CommScope Ruckus specific question. For those of you on the call that aren't familiar with Zone Director, Zone Director is a Ruckus product. It's a wireless LAN controller. I'm afraid if you have a Zone Director system managing your wireless APs, you can't use that for switch management. However, you could migrate to our newer system, which is the Smart Zone controller. You could deploy a Smart Zone controller, use that to manage your wireless APs instead, and then that can be used to concurrently manage wireless APs and our switches as well.
Okay, thank you.
We do provide a migration.
I want to go back, Simon, to what Riaan was talking about. He had 3 distinct areas in that slide, and one of them that really hit with me was self-optimization and healing network. Are you seeing any that are rolled out already? Are there any good references in your region?
So yeah, self-healing and optimization of networks is really about ensuring a reliable service to the end user. So from a foundational basis, so not at the wireless level, but at the wired level, the underpinnings of the wireless network. Yeah, self-healing in terms of if there's a failure in that network, then the wireless network would continue uninterrupted. The base network self-heals around that. Really, and then optimization of traffic on that wired network, that's well understood and has been around for many years, and in many cases is really built into the network design. From a wireless point of view, that self-healing and self-optimization is about the radio technology and the sophistication of the radios that you use, in our case, particularly in the Wi-Fi systems, and making sure that every single user gets the best experience they can. So optimizing the signal to each individual device rather than just broadcasting a massive the radio to everybody and not having it optimized to each user means you're just creating a lot of noise. So optimizing the experience for the user through directed radio, which is what we do on our wireless systems, but also that provides more reliability because it's a better signal. So when I see there's a question, actually, I'm going to jump ahead of you. Someone's asked, what's our reach from our base station on Wi-Fi 6? That is a bit of a how long is a piece of string question, because it depends what your environment is like. But so if you're in an open space, you'll get very good reach, many tens of meters or more, certainly on 5 gig Wi-Fi 6. Or in a congested environment, let's say a building with lots of small rooms, it's going to be much more challenging. But with optimized radio technology, you will still get good reach and good coverage. So, for example, in a hotel, you can have a corridor deployed Wi-Fi system doing Wi-Fi 6, and get good coverage across a large number of rooms from a single access point.
So we've got about 3 minutes left, and I need to start wrapping. We did have a question which was on Wi-Fi, which I am unfamiliar with, and our question was hoping that someone was going to be chatting about Wi-Fi. I don't know if we've actually got time for that, and maybe we need to have a separate discussion. So Simon, you can either answer on Wi-Fi, or you can give us what we should be thinking about in the next 6 months. The same question to yourself, Riaan. What do you think customers who have got this disparate network are grappling with, whether they should upgrade to Wi-Fi 6 or not, looking at different components? What is the one thing you're seeing folks struggling with that they should concentrate on in the next half year? I'll go with Simon.
So a few words on Wi-Fi. There's a technology I haven't heard mentioned for quite probably 2 or 3 years or more. So we're not doing anything with Wi-Fi, and I'm not sure how active Wi-Fi research is these days, particularly as Wi-Fi and mobile networks are becoming even more pervasive. In terms of what should people be looking at going forward, I think it goes back to something I mentioned earlier, is really ensuring, first of all, that your network is meeting the needs of your business. So that's in terms of the performance, the latency, the coverage of the Wi-Fi. So making sure that it is reaching all the points, because as Riaan pointed out in his presentation, more and more users are Wi-Fi connected. They're going to need connectivity everywhere. So it's really optimizing that, and then looking ahead and maybe moving to Wi-Fi 6 or upgrading your network to make sure it can reach the needs of your business today and also in the coming years.
Thank you. Riaan, anything in summary?
Yeah, from my side, I think you need to have a look at the scalability of your network, right?
Okay.
The demand on your network is going to increase over time, no doubt. And you need to have a network that is scalable. If you introduce a network that you need to rip and replace every 2-3 years, you're going to have a disaster on your hand. It's going to be very expensive, and the customer experience at the end of the day is not going to be what needs to be. So scalability, in my mind, is critical. Always look at scalability and growth, and then the adaptability of that infrastructure to cater for new trends, new demands of applications, new demands on higher capacities, etc.
Thank you very much. Riaan, Simon, it's really been an interesting discussion, and thank you for being here. To all of our attendees, thank you for all your questions. Eugene, I know we've got a question from you. We will send it through to you on email. From my summary of this, it's easy for the application users to take the limelight in the business, because they're almost the outer garments of what we are doing in our interaction with customers. The network folks are the inner surgeons of the business and are looking at the inner workings. And if that health is not looked after, you can end up in a lot of trouble. So I've learned a lot today. Thank you for taking me through the prep sessions and lowering your TLAs, 3-letter acronyms, to where I can understand them. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and Carrie for the privilege of facilitating. Over to you.
So thanks again from our side, guys. I really hope that you found today's session insightful. Please feel free, as always, pop me a mail if you've got any further questions, and I'll put you in touch with the CommScope team. We will be sending out a short survey after this, and we'd really appreciate your input on today's session and anything that you like covered in future. We will be doing a webinar event report back, so as soon as it's published on Tech Central, I'll let you know when it's live. Cheers from Tech Central, and we'll see you guys at the next one.